In this presentation of the Database Fundamentals series, we will look at a unary one-to-many relationship and a one-to-one and how to implement those in a database. Before you look at this presentation, you should already know about foreign keys and their role in the relational database. If you don't know, then you should look at some earlier presentations. Before we look at implementing the relationships, let's review what a primary key is. The primary key is one or more attributes that can uniquely identify each entity, instance, or each row in a table in the database. And when you look at the attributes for an entity, you may already have one that would serve as an identifier that uniquely identifies each entity instance. You might have a business that has already assigned unique inventory numbers to each inventory item. If you have that kind of an attribute, then designate it as the identifier in the data model and as the primary key in the database. But if you don't have such an attribute that would be unique for each row in the table, then you need to create one. And all the DBMS software, by the way, offers a feature for generating unique values. So if you create a primary key column and you want the database software to generate the unique values in that column, it can do that for you. So let's implement a unary one-to-many relationship. Do you remember what a unary relationship is? It's where an entity is related to itself. And we know from a previous presentation that in a one-to-many relationship, the many side gets the foreign key. But what if it's the same entity? How do you make this work? Well, we're simply going to add a column to the entity, and it's going to serve as the foreign key. In this case, in this example, we will add a supervisor ID column. So in the employee table shown here, we have added an EMP supervisor ID column. This holds the employee ID, the primary key value, for each employee's supervisor. So who supervises Bob Carson? If we look at Bob Carson and move over to his supervisor ID column, we see a 5014. If we then come over and look through the employee ID column, when we find 5014, we can see Daryl Jackson. So Bob Carson reports to Daryl Jackson. So who does Jason Mata supervise? Well, for Jason Mata, his EMP ID is 5016. So we can now move over to the supervisor ID foreign key column, scan that, and any time we see the 5016, then we'll know that that corresponding employee, Clint Roberts or Ken Thurman, report to Jason Mata. Note that this is the situation where the foreign key field cannot have the same name as its related primary key column. Both columns are in the same table, so they must have distinctly different names. How do we implement a relationship for a one-to-one? In a one-to-one relationship, how are we going to decide which entity or which table gets the foreign key? In a one-to-one relationship, you can actually put the foreign key in either side. Either way technically is correct, but don't put it in both because that would be needlessly redundant. Sometimes the business setting will help you determine the best place to put the foreign key. In our example here, we're going to put the foreign key of employee ID over in the location table. So we have an EMP ID, and that brings over the value or the ID for each employee. So we can see that a particular office location is assigned to, in this case, Teresa Roberts. Another office location is assigned to Alicia Minich. So in this presentation, we've looked at what to do when you don't have a suitable identifier attribute or a suitable primary key, and how you implement relationships in a unary one-to-one unary one-to-many relationship and a binary one-to-one relationship.